Hello, everyone, and welcome in to the Endgame Syndicate. Davis Mattek here. We are going to be doing a best ball draft on the program. First one with Dan, Nerdy Tenor on the program. Brian Hooper is here as well. There are some new best ball toy game videos up on the site. If you have not seen them yet, I encourage you to go check those out. We are going to be drafting a team in Best Ball Mania, hopefully finding a shipper. Dan, how many teams have you drafted in Best Ball Mania to this point? I don't know, and I'm very curious.
For this year, the answer is 0. So this will be number 1.
Amazing.
Yeah, I only really drafted them when I had free tickets from DraftKings. They gave out a bunch last year because they weren't filling their big one. So I would get on the treadmill and do a dozen of those. But I haven't done these, and it's kind of refreshing because I've been dragging Brian through all of my obscure code and game theory crap, and now it's sort of revenge because I'm not going to know what the hell's going on here. So it should be fun. I
Brian,
think. Go ahead. Yeah.
Brian, how many have you done on your own?
6, something like that. Not many.
He doesn't. You're not.
I got 22 in last year.
22. I mean, the draft caddy does make it pretty goddamn easy.
Yeah. How much time do I got left?
You have 36 days.
Okay. Yeah.
Is it how close is it to filling at this point?
It is not close at all. It is 50. Okay. It is 52.8% right now.
Wow.
But a month ago, it was over 33% filled. So a lot of us in the streets sort of believed that it might fill early, that it might fill, kind of before was optimal. And then they released, I believe, the largest $5 one they've ever released, $200,000 to first. Like absolutely massive. So that really slowed it down. And they also released some single entry contests and things like that. And so it's slowing down a little bit, but you can definitely tell via kind of what's happening in the rooms that there are some more casual drafters entering the streets in right now, or honestly, maybe some more guys kind of like what Adam does, where Adam kind of just drafts like good players. He, like, we were doing the round table the other day, and he was like, "Oh, I've never really thought about that before. Never really thought about pushing a quarterback later or whatever." So, that's, I suppose that's more the DFS mindset of just drafting off the projections.
So you're right in the middle of the pack here. It looks like we've got the 6th.
Yes, we've got the 6th pick. That is sort of, I prefer the 5th pick of all of them. I think the 5th pick is the best. But if we get one guy who does something a little squirrely ahead of us, then we are going to get to take we don't get to. I thought we might get to take our thumbnail guy, Justin Jefferson, but no, it's going to go chalk, and we are going to take Amon-Ra St. Brown. That'll help us in the wide receiver bucket, Brian. We are going to be right. I do notice in a lot of my drafts, I don't fill the draft caddy bucket. I do not get to tier 1 in the wide receiver bucket very often.
It's harder than it looks. You kind of need to be a piss boy basically to get there. Can you take off the headers? I hate the way that caddy displays with the headers.
What do you mean the headers? What headers?
You go to settings and take
said
headers.
That the other day. Okay, let's see if I can do this live on air without messing it up. Show CSV headers.
Yeah,
I took it off.
Okay, now go back to the.
Did I fix it? I have to refresh.
It might have to refresh. Might not. I'm not even sure.
Did it do it?
Probably. Yeah.
Okay, there we go. I took off the CSV headers. No data for Jeremy football. Looks like. So we've got a couple guys. So this would be evidence to what I'm saying, which is that drafts are starting to get less people who are red badgers, people who have done 150 of them. So we've got one guy who didn't draft at all last year, one guy who did 3, two guys who did 21. That's sort of interesting. Another guy who did 3, and then another no data. So
you got 4 noobs?
for noob-ish, relatively noob. And one of the noobish guys did just take Jonathan Taylor way ahead of ADP at the turn, which I think he's going to regret. Hard to get in that bucket.
4 noobs is pretty good in poker with the poker world.
You know, this is what people complain about with DraftKings, though, where these DraftKings drafts are so full of noobs, but it is very hard to get your quarterback. It's very hard to get your quarterback in those drafts because they just go willy-nilly. All right, we are about back up here. Either of these next 2 picks by my rankings, I think, are the stone nuts. So we're happy to get Deebo Samuel, who correlates with the Week 17 game for St. Brown, or Devin A-Chain. So I'll toss this one to you guys. I think A-Chain is the best pick on the board effectively where he goes. And I don't care if I have to take him in the 2nd round. I don't care if I take him at the 2-3 turn. I mean, obviously I love to get him in the 3rd round, but a player in this format where the bad games don't matter and the good games really matter, why would I not just want to take the guy who provably can score 50 points in a game? I mean, that feels like the entire goal of the format.
Mm-hmm.
I always think of these guys as like, can they realistically be much higher than their ADP? Like,
yeah, I mean, A-Chain could score the most points in fantasy football if he plays 17 healthy games, I think.
Right. So, like, let's say, like, let me see here. It's kind of tough in these first rounds, but like Devontae Smith, I don't know. Is he realistically ever going to be top 5?
No shot. No shot, really.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe if AJ Brown suffers a season-ending injury, but even then, you know, it probably would be more like he probably is likely he could be the 9th highest scoring wide receiver, but not top 5 probably.
Yeah. It's not a great barometer really for here, but A-Chan, right? We're going A-Chan, not A-Chain anymore. Is
that's what he said. That's what he said. He said.
I know. I don't know why he would do
his
that.
name.
A-Chain's so much cooler.
A-Chain's so much cool. Brian, we could do it. We could take your bear. We could take DJ Moore. Are you gonna hate yourself enough to watch the Hall of Fame game tomorrow night?
Is Caleb's not playing, right? Or is he?
Caleb's not gonna play. Caleb's not gonna play. He's gonna be on the sidelines in a hoodie. Well, probably not a hoodie, actually.
No, I was waiting with bated breath for this game to start. No, actually, I didn't know it was tomorrow until you just mentioned it. So,
are you going to play? This is maybe more of a roundtable question, but are you going to play preseason NFL DFS, or the prize pool is big enough for you, Nerdy?
No, I could. I think it's a lot of work, and it's not the kind of work I want to do for preseason. Like
that's ball knowing work. That's like having an opinion on who the best 5th string running back in the NFL is.
Yeah, knowing things like how much field time are they actually likely to get. I mean, those kinds of things are. If you're good at that, I think you could probably print. Maybe not get a ton of volume down, but probably not doing that. Are you going to do any, Brian?
No chance.
It's also like the beat reporter stuff, you know, like the coach is saying, well, we're going to get so-and-so bunch of reps, you know, no one, and people, casual enders, they don't know it, like stuff like that. And I'm not paying attention.
I mean, you want to talk about DFS being dead. NFL DFS used to actually be one of the most profitable games where people would be playing guys with like who would not be active in games. Like it was like as about as soft as DFS could get, and it's totally gone now. I mean, they're low cost to entry. There's a lot of good information out there where the edge used to just be like actually like knowing who was playing, but now you've got people disseminating that information for you, like the publicly available. I mean, there are even projections for preseason NFL DFS, which I would have never imagined, 5 years ago or whatever.
Yeah.
All right, we are in. These are basically the worst spots here. These fourth round spots where all the premium wide receivers are gone, and you don't have a stack set up with your quarterback. But so we can either take an elite quarterback and try and set up Lamar, or we can take Mahomes and try and set him up. What do you want to do, Brian?
I don't care. You guys call it.
What do you think, Nerdy?
I have nothing to add here.
Take the tight end.
We're going to take it is a little bit better to do that because you can't get the room can screw you. So if you do Lamar first, the room can screw you and take Mark Andrews. Whereas if you take Andrews, like obviously you'd like to have Lamar, but it's not a prerequisite. The room can also, in a room like this where we've got 4 straight wide receivers, 2 teams have no running backs yet, a bunch of teams have no running backs yet. And if they just keep taking wide receivers, they can screw. I've seen it happen where someone's taken 4th round Mahomes and then they have not been able to get one of his wide receivers on the way back, which is, basically that is like that team cannot win the $1.5 million. There's like you have no access to the $1.5 million, which is not great. It's not what you want.
I can see why you don't get to bucket 1 in wide receivers.
Well, I'm never. Yeah. Well, it's because to get to bucket 1 in wide receiver, I would have had to have taken Christian Kirk or Terry McLaurin or taken Hollywood Brown way ahead of ADP. And I just think that's my player take. I just think that's terrible. Like, I think it's like pretty terrible. Like Christian Kirk instead of Mark Andrews. How does that help me win $1.5 million? There's like your best case scenario for Christian Kirk is that he's kind of the guy who helps get you there, not that he is the guy that is responsible for winning you the $1.5 million. So McLaurin goes. Go ahead, Brian.
Did Jackson go? Because the donkey at the end has I was going to say you can't. I don't think you can pass him up if you want him, because that donkey's got Zay Flowers at the end.
That's how you have to set it up. Yeah, Artillery Frost is correct. It's like I have trouble getting in that bucket because I think that A-Chain and Kyron Williams are such strong picks. Did Lamar just go? He did just go. All right. Oh. So this is where we take Hollywood Brown and we say, but that is why we took Mark Andrews first, because if we took, I mean, obviously Lamar, I think, can win without Mark Andrews, but just thinking about that permutation, like when we get to week 17, what is the highest scoring quarterback plus tight end fantasy point projection going to be? Kelsey and Mahomes, but that's a more expensive pairing. Then it'll be Lamar and Andrews, and it'll be Lamar and Andrews by a lot. Like, but Mark Andrews will probably be projected for 14.5 half PPR points, probably something like that will be his standard projection. And Zay Flowers will be projected for 12.3 or something, and those that gap in projection I think is quite valuable. How much? Go ahead, Brian.
You can also get Caleb. You can get Goff. Can't get Mahomes anymore, but
I keep that. I probably do that to a fault where I break ties a lot in like the first 8 rounds on where does that leave me at quarterback? Does that leave me open at quarterback later? Like I would probably sacrifice. It's hard to put a point value on it, but I definitely sacrifice some level of other than in the 5th round where I just take a chief. But if we were on the clock and it was T Higgins and Zay Flowers, I mean, I would maybe take T straight up over Flowers a lot of the times, just because it's harder to get Flowers and Lamar, but it's pretty possible. Like you can just get T and Joe Burrow whenever you want, or DJ Moore versus Devonta Smith. It's harder to get Hurts than it is to get Caleb. So I will sacrifice points to keep the quarterback door open.
Do you mean like ADP really is kind of the good? How much ADP are you willing to sacrifice?
All right. So we can do a Dunze give us the double stack, or we can do Watson to give us another quarterback. What do you think? What do you think is optimal here?
I know what I would do.
You take a Tuesday.
Uh-huh.
Welcome.
Yeah, hopefully no one's watching this stream.
welcome to the team. Welcome to the team, Rome. So I like that, and we have Devin A-Chain, so we don't have to worry at all here. Nerdy, what are your thoughts? You just watched me made 6 picks. What are your thoughts?
So in this last pick, so how much of a dynamic is it? So if you have one receiver and then you take the second receiver and then the quarterback is not taken, doesn't it make it? It should make it more likely that no one else is going to grab him. So you're locking him down.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So it does the thing that we were talking about on the round table the other day, where maybe we're up on the clock in round 10 and Caleb Williams is right there at ADP, but we say, well, let's see where is the Keenan Allen team? So the Keenan Allen team is directly to our left.
Yeah.
So the dynamic is a little different, but the Keenan Allen team has Jalen Hurts. So they probably actually don't want Caleb Williams. So we are going to aim to get Caleb Williams, multiple spots after ADP.
Another question. I'm looking at this team number 11 here, and they took Kelsey and then Pitts 2 rounds later.
That is not optimal.
That seems weird to me.
Yeah.
Just anytime you take an elite player at a position, then you should be waiting longer to take the next one.
Yes,
right?
100% correct.
Okay.
That there's kind of this thought right now that lower the second, third, fourth tiers of tight ends are so weak, but spending a 6th round pick on a guy who's not going to hit your lineup half the time is rather bad. We are kind of in a gross spot here. Could take Jameson Williams ahead of ADP. Take Aaron Jones. That doubles us up on week 6 buys at running back, but we are going to do it.
So what's conventional, or is there conventional wisdom on bye weeks for this?
Conventional wisdom on bye weeks is that it's like that just did probably cost us some projected points over the course of the 14 weeks, having our first 2 running backs have the same bye week. Conventional wisdom, though, is you definitely don't want to have 2 quarterbacks who both have the same bye week and only have 2 quarterbacks. Then you're costing yourself 20 points, which is well within the margin for just missing, even if your team is good, missing in advance. Same thing for tight end. But it's definitely one of the things that these best ball nerds argue about. It's does it matter that both your running backs would have the same bye week? Does it matter that both your wide receivers would have the same bye week? I mean, my favorite teams, by and large, have a week 6 bye. The Dolphins, the Chiefs, the Vikings, and the Rams. Those are 4 of the 10 best projected passing offenses. All have the same bye week. So that does lead me into some brutal spots. But Pitts and Kelsey together, Kelsey ahead of ADP, Pitts 3 spots ahead of ADP is not. I mean, that team should not be feeling that great about it. They don't even have a 3rd wide receiver yet heading into round 9. So, Rick, they are not going to hit the buckets. That team is not going to hit the bucket.
No, you could also, Davis, you could check their buckets. If you select their team, it'll update the buckets so you can review listeners' lineups and stuff on your show. If you want.
Yeah, my headphone also just died, so you're gonna have to repeat yourself.
Okay, can you hear us?
Yes. Yeah.
I said if you select the users in the draft, it'll update the bucket charts for them specifically, so you can review listener lineups.
Damn, what can't the caddy do?
So we got after you do this pick.
Yeah. Man, this is another pretty brutal spot because there's not really a quarterback we want. There's not there's not an outstanding value at running back either. And it would be a reach on any potential wide receiver. So I guess we just take the best running back.
Why don't you take Swift?
That I think is too. I think that is overstacking in these. I think to expect
no such thing.
There, look, I'm about as bullish on Caleb as you could possibly be, but I think a rookie quarterback.
How does this team win?
Well, this team wins. This team actually wins if DeAndre Swift sucks and Caleb Williams drops back 42 times a game. Is actually
no, because then if he's not running the ball, he's not catching the ball. They're not doing as well. Come on.
This team. This team is more of a Roshan team. This is.
I think it makes more sense to say Swift being hurt helps him if
Sure.
the backup actually does something.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, you'd have to do the math on that one.
I think you pull the trigger there, and then you get Caleb. What is Caleb coming up here or next one?
Caleb. So his ADP would be close to this next pick.
Yeah, what is his ADP? I thought it was in the 9th or 10th, right?
Yeah, actually no. So we are waiting on Caleb a minimum of one more selection, but maybe even 2. We might try and push him all the way to 126 because we have both of them.
I wouldn't do that.
Yeah, how much of a disaster is it to not get him? I guess it's pretty big disaster.
It's a pretty big disaster.
Yeah,
it's a pretty big disaster.
I think it's too risky to push your stacks. Just take them. I also think with like the Aaron Jones thing we were talking about with the bye weeks, I think these best ball bros think they know more than they do, Dan, and they should pass on the bye weeks when it's the same thing, unless it's just blatant.
What do you mean pass?
If pass is like if you're like picking between 2 RBs or it could be a different position, but one of the RBs has the same bye week as your stud RB, you pass on them. I think you need more evidence.
It makes I get the argument. I mean, especially when you're getting further down in the draft where the differences between the players are smaller, it does kind of make sense to gravitate on something you actually know for sure, which is the bye week, I guess.
If you have Aaron Jones sitting there at 27 spots past ADP, well, that's a lot of evidence. The market's probably knows some, assuming there's no like recent injury news or something. Then I can see, okay, I'm just going to have double bye weeks with my top 2 RBs. But otherwise I wouldn't. Now, a no baller should like make these decisions. In theory, like they should know they're paying attention. They should know like, oh, this is a really good pick for this team. I don't care about the bye week that much. So they should be doing that. I just think they probably don't know as much as they do, some of them. And I think it's just best to do things like not take the bye weeks in that spot. Don't try to get greedy with Caleb Williams. Just take them. Make sure you don't get screwed. Stuff like that.
Well, so that means then on the push it versus have a dead team argument that our team don't have a dead. You would prefer not to have any dead teams in the portfolio versus having 10 super teams and on 150 best ball manias.
I mean, if that's the binary,
maybe it's a question of when you push it. So maybe you should be more likely to push it with earlier combinations than with later ones, where like with later ones, the differences are so much smaller anyway.
But it's more disastrous. So we have our 3rd round pick and our 6th round pick are correlated to one quarterback. It's a fairly large disaster to not have him. But we also, like right here, this pick that we are about to make, there are a lot of very good, well-projected skill position players still there. And each round you get later, the less true that is.
Sure.
All right. Well, the guy I really wanted to take here just went, so we can placate Brian, assuming that Javelina does not select Caleb Williams.
Who was it? Shaheen
Wicks.
Oh, of course. Wow. How did I not know that?
Sometimes you just got to know ball, and
literally, I think that's the only forget the perfect team versus perfect dead team thing. That's too much of a binary. Like this is like you really like Dontavian Wicks,
yes,
and so you're willing to risk not getting Caleb Williams because which might be true. I'm not saying it's not.
Yeah,
but I don't know. I think most people,
but from the logic of the game, the logic of the game is much simpler, which is that if you just get to the end of this and you have 2 Bears wide receivers and you don't have Caleb Williams, you are excommunicated from winning. $1.5 million, and that is way worse.
Yeah, like you really need to know ball and the draft. This argument here, the counter argument to that is that the common logic, so that likely combinatorial ownership of two RBs with the same bye week should be lower. And that's true. And that wasn't Davis's reasoning. Maybe he thought it, but he didn't say it.
It's latent reasoning. All right. It's like that's so buried in me because I know this stuff so much that it's buried in me. I think we take Goff here, or we can try and push Herbert another round with Palmer. But Goff is with our first round pick. There's not really a great wide receiver.
I kind of like Goff here. I think a lot of people don't do this.
Have a lot of quarterbacks been going, or is this sort of a typical rate?
This right here. So if we don't get Herbert with our next pick, kind of the really good quarterbacks are gone. I am going to take Goff. So if we don't get Goff here and Herbert is gone by our next selection, we're then down to, guys who don't run at all, guys who have, injury or age concerns like Rodgers or Cousins or Stafford. To me, Herbert at quarterback 17 is kind of like the last guy who you think is going to have a bunch of quarterback 1 weeks.
I would like to see if we could solve that, Dan. Kind of this argument of best ball versus season long, like your college buddies season long, is you need a perfect outcome kind of to win, right? So like for this team, we need Caleb Williams to have an awesome rookie season, and a lot of it goes to the two wide receivers we drafted. So if that happens, we don't need Jared Goff, kind of, So that's kind of the logic that between season long and best ball.
Well, you might need Goff to fill in the weeks where Caleb doesn't do well. Like, what you need is Caleb Williams to crush a lot of weeks and Jared Goff to be really good in the weeks where he doesn't crush, or at least good enough.
But like, if we're talking winning 1.5 million, Caleb Williams probably did awesome.
Right.
And so like there was very few weeks that he wouldn't be
or at least did awesome or Goff was awesome in the regular season and Caleb Williams did awesome in the fantasy playoffs.
Yeah, but just generally speaking, I'm not arguing for this either way.
Okay, so what's the question?
Is can we figure that out in a toy game of how perfect do you need your team to be in these two different styles of fantasy football, of the home league, or whatever, we a 10-man or 100-man, not even 10 15-man versus 10,000 or whatever, we don't need to go up to 300,000, but like at a certain point, are we trying to build the perfect team, or is that really just a fallacy?
Well, it's a fallacy, and I think it's illustrated by this question. Consigliere is asking about taking, so like you don't have to take a second tight end. You actually can just take one. The software will let you. You take Andrews, you take Kelsey, and you just do you only take one. I mean, I think that's bad for several reasons. The first is you are going to give up at least 1 week of points. The other being tight end scoring is very weird. It's very related to touchdowns historically. Yeah. There are going to be a lot of weeks where Mark Andrews scores 8.7 half PPR points. And what if those are the weeks that Chigakonkwo happens to score 2 touchdowns? Like you are giving up points, and it's bad for playoff stuff because having the nuts is going to be more important for the playoffs. And you just want to have more. You also, not only do you want to have more opportunities at the nuts, you want to have the opportunities for like weird nuts. So like using 2 tight end scores, like if Greg Dulcich happens to have 17 points in week 16 or whatever, that's going to be like a really good, unique way to add flex points or whatever.
Well, it's also just, it seems like, oh wait, are we coming up? Oh, I'll wait till after our pick.
Yeah, we need to take a wide receiver. Brian, you can have whoever you want here.
Oh God. Probably Douglas, I guess.
No, Douglas is dust right now. You got to read the camp.
I guess I can't have whoever I want. I definitely don't want Jackson. I mean, I don't like Mooney, but go ahead. I don't care.
I don't really like Mooney either. This might actually, you know what? This is a good spot to take our backup tight end. We've got, he correlates to the Lions. He correlates with his teammate Aaron Jones. This is potentially a double elite tight end team. Yeah. So the reason why I said no Douglas is
whatever you want.
Douglas is like one of the worst priced guys on the board right now. He like is being drafted like a clear starter on a pretty bad team, but the training camp reports is that like the Patriots are not even viewing him as a clear starter right now. Like he might be behind the rookies already. And that's without Kendrick Bourne, who's injured right now, coming back, and Bourne will be back, by week 3 or 4 or whatever.
So just getting back to that discussion about only having one tight end, it just seems like, the fewer players you have at a position, the more value there is just getting one more, because the likelihood that second player is going to score for you in any week is quite high.
Yeah.
So each one you add is worth less. So
yes,
it seems huge to have two, even if it's not a very good one.
I mean, just think about all the times in your life you've been playing DFS and you paid up for Travis Kelce, and then you watch Tyler Higbee outscore him on DraftKings in a week. Like,
yeah.
It's happened enough times to make you like upset about it. Yeah, I mean, that's so funny. Like, the way you present it, Dan, is so simple, but like that is not a sentence a best ball bro would ever say. Like that sort of thinking is so number DFS like best ball bros really don't think that way. Like they all want to make more specific player arguments.
It's funny though, because what I just said is far easier than what all the best ball bros are dealing with. Like,
best ball bros don't want to make anything easy. Best ball bros want to have long, convoluted 45-minute arguments about your 18th round pick. That's kind of what the whole best ball space is built on.
That's fair.
I was thinking a good video we could do for Endgame will be eventually when Nerdy gets his most complicated toy game. Davis, you could come on and tell us all the theories that whatever we can test, who knows what we can test, by then. And then because that's kind of what we do. Like we'll adjust standard deviation and projections and add players and stuff and see what the effect has on an equilibrium strategy. And so you could tell us, like all the myths or unprovable things. And then we could try to prove them.
That would be fun. That would be fun.
That would be a good video, I think. The tight end, I think is different than what we started with which was a double stack QB.
Yeah.
And I think you need that double stack QB to be good, like to realistically have a shot at 1.5 million. So I do think it's not really apples to apples, but I still, my guess is, and I'm not really strong either way. It's probably closer to you still want like Jared Goff here, or just a solid team in general, instead of just banking on your elite tight end getting 20 every week. And like, that's how you make 1.5 million. I bet it's somewhere close. Like in DFS, just because a team is, owned an MLB 5-man stacks owned 1% total. That's great. If that stack goes up, you got a pretty good chance of winning, but you're probably not doing that. You're most nights you're probably still, I mean, it depends, but you're still going with guys who have a better shot of actually winning.
You still need the points. I mean, that's the thing at the end of the day is it's like, sure, I could scroll the F down on every pick and have the weirdest combinatorial ownership of any player who did 150 entries in the tournament, and it still doesn't mean anything if I don't know, let's say Cooper Kupp leads wide receivers in scoring this year. Like none of it matters. All that combinatorial stuff doesn't matter if I miss that. Gonna take my short king Wan'Dale Robinson here. This team's working out. This team's working out all right. We're doing okay.
Aaron Jones,
wide receiver.
Aaron Jones is the only one I wasn't thrilled with.
Got Gotta read the camp reports, dude. All the players are
Maybe,
saying he's the man.
Josh Palmer too, kind of, but I mean,
that the room did that to me. I didn't, although he was part of my. So if we had not, like for example, had Goff taken there, he would have given us another quarterback out because we could have taken Justin Herbert.
I see.
Rico might get cut. Didn't you just tweet that out?
I did, but then the next day, camp report, you got to update you got to remain Bayesian with this stuff. I find that I get a good amount of natural roster diversification and difference in my rosters just by being Bayesian based off whatever the temperature is. So like if I draft 7 teams on one day and the quote that day is that Rico Dowdle might not make the team, then I don't have Rico on any of those teams. But then the next day, if the coaches are really praising him and saying like, oh, Rico's the man, he's top of mind for me, and I'll take him 4 times that day or 3 times, because I'm in all these slow drafts right now. I'm in like 200 slow drafts right now. And so that's just allowing me, I don't know how nerdy. I would love to see this toy game, but I don't know how it would be done.
I don't know if that's a toy game. That's a game.
That's a game.
It would be really hard to do. I'd love to be able to do that, but it would take a year of research and like $10,000 worth of computer time to probably figure that out accurately. Dare to dream.
That would be your proprietary product, probably, if you build that. I do think maybe we could do something simple where you consider the season 1 game, because really isn't it not kind of but if we really want to toy game this, just like, so it's 1,000 points instead of 150, for the 1 week. It's really the same thing, right? But then when you have a playoff structure with X% of the teams after that, so you make it maybe the top. Let's say you sim 10,000 teams, and then the top 200 get into the playoff tournament, something like that.
Still sounds really hard, but maybe doable. We'll figure something out. But Davis, to your point about getting natural diversification, I haven't played any of these, but I've done a fair number of baseball drafts in the dailies. Yeah. And there, I've quite often found that my code really likes something that's not very popular. So I keep getting to it and getting to it and getting to it. But there's like enough randomness in what my opponents do that pieces of what I normally get taken, and it sort of naturally leads me down a slightly different path. So yeah, I'm getting a lot of, Cleveland or whatever, but each team is still significantly different from each other. So,
which is, I mean, that's kind of nice. Like I was really running into a problem where a lot of my teams were looking the same, like really like, so like not only were they looking the same players, but it would also be like too much of the same construction, or like, so maybe I have like a plan A to start with, and then I realize that I'm doing plan A too much, so then I switch to plan B. But then what I have is I have a lot of plan A with plan B, and not a lot of plan C with plan B, not a lot of plan A with plan D. And so it's like the clumping problem from using solvers, like the way DFS used to work, where your 150th lineup would just be so much shittier than your first, because it would be your exposures would kind of be flat. And so the best plays would never be in the 150th lineup. Yeah, and I'd kind of been having that problem in best ball.
Interesting.
How many running backs on this team you think, Brian? You think we're good with 5? A-Chain, Aaron Jones, Brooks, Dowdle, Kamani, Vidal, or do you think we take another one?
I think fine. The 5's fine unless 6 just hits you in the face.
Yeah, we are to the part of the year where the field has started to get pretty good. Like the value is getting real wrung out of the end of drafts. It's a lot of quarterbacks and tight ends left at the end, because all the, we kind of have a good idea of what depth charts and things are going to look like. So there's just not a ton of great picks left later in drafts. It's just not that fun. It's a lot more fun to draft in May when, like Javon Baker is there in the 18th round. Although I guess I did take him a little bit ahead of ADP. So maybe the call is coming from inside the house.
Huh.
It's not a great wide receiver to go with either of our quarterbacks here. We could take Khalif Raymond. I think he's an ass pick, though. Let's scroll the F down. We're going to take Bo Melton as a scroll the F down.
Yeah, I like, if you don't, it makes sense to me if you don't have anything to go with your stacks in these late picks. Like, wouldn't you be inclined to take a more volatile pick? Like,
yes,
a guy who could be breakout and just randomly give us a shit ton of points a couple weeks.
Yeah, I'm now, as we're getting a little bit close. I mean, I do like to get around, like, if we had not taken Jared Goff, we could have taken Daniel Jones with Wandale, and that would have, we had a better wide receiver and instead. But a lot of these guys now here at the end, I am focusing a lot on getting guys who have not been drafted for a huge chunk of the contest. Bo Melton would be a great example. The guy everyone's talking about right now is Andre Yoshibas from Cincinnati, where he basically was not getting drafted at all, like until like the last week, which is like, even if he had 100% ownership from now on, I still think is fine, because the max he could be on is, 50% of the teams or whatever, which just is going to necessarily mean he's a more unique player, even if he is, a lock now.
Are you streaming in the highest definition allowed?
Yes.
Looks pretty sharp on my monitor when I.
Oh, it looks kind of fuzzy to mine.
Oh.
The next toy game you're doing, Dan, are we gonna get in the Combinatorics? I can't remember.
Well, yeah, I spent a couple hours this morning trying to design games that showed concepts. But yeah, I think we're gonna do. I'm looking at 3-man 3-rounders and then changing the pool of athletes to have different tiers and see how often and when you basically punt on a value pick to get to weird combos or weirder combos. But it's really tricky, which is why it's nice to have a little solver for it. Yeah, I've got one running in the background right now. In fact,
that's so touching on a punt play relative to his projection or relative to their ownership.
Basically deciding like what is the balance between ownership and getting weird. Like,
yeah.
So like if you have like 2 players that are a tier A and then 2 in tier B, and then everybody else is in the third tier. This is a game I'm looking at right now. And it's a 3-round, 3-man draft. So there's 9 athletes being drafted. Like you'd expect most of the time it would go A, and then B, and then the next round would start with B, and then they'd divvy out all the C's, right? But at some point there's enough players in the contest and the difference between the tiers is within range where you might go A, B, and then the guy is going to skip to a C that he can't because the BB combo is too often if it's always played with the other B, even though those are always the 2 best players left. So he's actually going to, depending on how you have it configured, and that's what I want to explore, is going to reach down, even though it's considerably worse projection because it's a rare combination.
What sport is that most compatible with? Golf?
Golf is about the one? Yeah, golf would be the best analogy. Although I have to make the differences much larger to make the effects obvious, right?
Sure.
In real world golf drafts, which on Underdog are all round 1, like there are huge swaths of the field that are basically indistinguishable from each other in terms of, if you look at a decent projection source, they're all just clustered around this really narrow band, and you could just do almost anything as long as it's not what everyone else is doing, and probably be doing a pretty good job of it. but I want to find, like, I'm pushing it pretty hard. I'm like, okay, this third tier is like way worse than the second tier, like, and still you'll find just smatterings of these weird combos that are really poorly projected, but they just print when they hit, because they're so rare, I guess.
Yeah. I'm like, I was trying to think of like what would an example of that be? Like, baseball, there's the the 87 weighted runs created plus guy, but he's got the isolated slugging at 210 or whatever. The Joey Gallo, the Adam Dunn. I guess in golf it would be like a Siwoo Kim or a Benny Ann, like the worst putters in the world, but like the 1 week they find the putter at 7% or whatever, they absolutely print. I'm sure there's a best ball analogy. I mean, the best ball analogy is the Puka Nakua, the Kyron Williams or whatever, But you got to know ball. You got to know ball to find that guy. You do not have to know ball to find that guy in golf, really. Like that. That's kind of evident from the data.
And the other thing with these toy games that'll get different once we get to really big toys is there are certain effects you find when the athlete pool is quite small that I expect will largely go away when it's quite large. Because so it's one thing if you have a finite set of combos available that you could actually get to. It highly incentivizes you to get to all of them or any of them that can be reached, because it has to, just for the ownership of all the combinations. But if you're looking at a real sport like a football battle royale, like the amount of combos is so high that you're probably less incentivized to do weird shit because there's so many other ways to get different. And in fact, that's one of the points I want to push. So I'm gonna have one game where it's gonna be like 2 A's, 2 B's, and like 5 C's. So that's 9 athletes, and that's 100% drafted. Then I'll look at 2 A's, 2 B's, and 20 C's. And the fact that there are all these additional options at the C tier may change things at the other tiers, right? Because you can, it's so easy to get different just by picking some random guy in the C tier. So
that's what I was wondering, is because you can theoretically get completely unowned teams in Battle Royale. Like if you wanted to do Daniel Jones, Wandale Robinson, and Theo Johnson in Battle Royale for week 1. I don't know how many entries are in them normally, but theoretically you could be the only team that would have done that.
Right. But you're giving up too much, right?
Right.
That's the question.
You have to find the line.
You have to find that line, yeah. And my suspicion is, and I've been wrong a lot with just much simpler questions already with my exploration, is my theory is that the combinatoric considerations, like the idea of getting combinatorically different in something like a daily, can basically be solved by just going wider at the lower tiers, like just scrolling down once you get past the premiums. Like it's probably enough to do that. And then in the rare cases where you're given the opportunity to grab, 2 premium players that never get to go together, yes, by all means, grab those. But most of those probably aren't going to be achievable, right? That's the thing. I found that too, even in my toy games. There are some combos in some of them that if you could get to them, you would be printing, but you can never get to them because the way the athletes come out, everyone is incentivized to prevent anyone from getting those because they're such good picks in other constructions that you just never get a chance. I mean, this is obvious in real best ball too. You're not getting, McCaffrey and,
CeeDee Lamb.
CeeDee Lamb and, whatever together. That's never going to happen. That draft will be canceled, right? If that happens.
See, you get such different opinions on this in best ball. So Hayden came in and said, the round 1-2 turn reach, which Hayden says is, very obviously plus EV.
Yeah.
But I look at it and I'm like, man, there are some examples of it, But I guess it comes back down to combinatorics again, because what you don't want is you don't want any permutation of the combinatoric where the person also has a first round pick available in there. So like you wouldn't want to do Malik Neighbors and Cooper Kupp, because if you did that, there will be people that have that with Christian McCaffrey, that they also have it with the first overall pick, because you're able to some percentage of the time get those players at the 2-3 turn. So you have to be very mindful of how you do it.
Yeah, I do think the turn is a good place to think about it. Like a simpler case, like in a daily, if you have, if you're drafting last, which is 6th position, and like it's always the same 2 guys available to you that should be drafted, and then for some reason everyone is always drafting, one of 2 guys next. That kind of reach seems really valuable if the drop off is small, right? But by the time you get to further rounds, like everything's been so scrambled anyway, like you're gonna get to a lot of different combos, presumably just by virtue of the fact that your opponents aren't robots, right? Yeah.
True. Yeah.
The scroll the F down is the 2024 best ball meta, Dan. I don't know if you watch any of our pods, but
yeah, that I named my variable for selecting in my code. Scroll the F down.
We've been doing this for a couple of years, but it just seems so obvious in the dailies to like when you have a tight end who's projected at like let's say 15 points, he's drafted 100% of the time, and then another tight end who's projected at 12 who's drafted 5% of the time. It's like I think this is a pretty obvious. And with toy games in general, one thing people should keep in mind is the way Dan's doing it, the way it should be done is everyone's performing. What's the word? Optimally, like they're trying to make a point where no one can improve the strategy. So, like for example, where you mentioned like there's combos you never get to.
Right.
Well, like yeah, if everyone's playing the way, but like in an example where somebody's cheating or something, then maybe you can get the CD Lamb, or you're just with 11 other donkeys or something.
Right.
So go ahead.
I was going to say best ball has a funny dynamic there too, with in games where there's correlation, like football and baseball, where you're both competing against and in a sense working with your opponents, because if you're in a sharp room, your opponents are correlating, which makes it easier for you to correlate also. So like you want your opponents to be smart in some ways and stupid in others. I mean,
you want your opponents to be a competent 2-5 no limit player, but not a competent 5-10 no limit player. You want them to understand. You want them to respect your raises, but you also want them to like check fold on the turn a lot.
It is a funny dynamic where the actions of your opponents, enough of them can make it so that like everyone in the draft is negative EV. This is such a weird, like I even saw this we saw this in this tiny toy game we did last, where there's one of the players is mixing their strategy because the options are all equal, and so they're just trying to get the ownership right. But in one of the situations that they pick, it ends up making both of the players have bad lineups. So like the second player is guaranteed to have a bad lineup, but then if he goes a certain way, the first player is just screwed. And it's sort of a strange feature of the game that people talked about this in poker too much and made this idea like you don't want people playing with you who are bad because they're not gonna respect your play. And I think that's largely bullshit in poker.
Yeah.
But in best ball, there's actually a little bit of something to that, where like what in this draft you just did, where you fairly confidently said this quarterback's not going to get drafted. Well, a week before opening night, where the donkey ratio is probably doubled or tripled in these drafts, you probably can't count on that anymore, right? somebody might just snipe you for just no reason whatsoever.
I'm on side team donkey. It sounds like I'm in the minority, because isn't it really on the average? And there's other things donkeys can do to make them really, and like to make a really bad lineup to improve your chances of advancing.
True.
So they might not ruin the stacks. They might just draft a bad team, right? So
it's a mixed bag. I mean, the benefit is you're going to have, it's going to be much easier to hit your draft buckets if people are just reaching for no reason, right? So yeah, I think you get both of those things, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
if there were no,
give you both.
I think you want to draft with idiots. You want to draft with idiots who are not drafting up rankings.
So you're on my side.
Tools. Yeah,
I think all things being considered, you want to draft with idiots.
Yes.
It's just that they can actually screw you some of the time.
Yeah,
right. They can, but on average.
It's different playing against donkeys in poker and basketball, but the skill is figuring out how different it is what Artillery Frost just said. Yeah, it's not like you can just show up and take your money like playing 1-3 no limit at a casino with a bunch of drunks or whatever. Like, you do have to think about it. But what they're going to do, I mean, you can exploit them either way. It's like, so if you're going to take quarterbacks really early, you're going to screw my stacks. I'm going to maximize my value by getting skill position players around later than they're supposed to go. If they are taking running backs too early, you grab a bunch of wide receivers. Like, there are a lot of ways to exploit bad drafters. You just have to be paying attention.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
The binary dance setup though is actually more fair. Like, you want a drafter who will stay in their lane but still suck some other way. So when you're comparing that, then maybe that's better than a bad player. But really what will happen is they might be good. You know, they might stay in their lane and also draft good teams, where a bad player might be bad both ways. But a semi-good player, a medium player, is probably only bad one way, which is somehow they screw up later on but stay in their lane. So I still think on average, just like poker, you want the donkeys. Just poker's just so much more obvious in my opinion. Like,
right. And if in a non-correlated sport, like, it's all good, right? Because the donkeys are just drafting players too soon. And that's just all good for everyone else, right?
That's really just an argument that all of this mental energy spent doing 5-hour best ball streams would be better spent doing anything else and just letting draft, doing what Justin McMahon does and just auto drafting off ranks and advancing more teams than people who cared that much,
Yeah, I mean, we're so in the weeds. It's worth remembering that, like, usually the biggest edges come from your opponents doing just the stupidest, most obviously wrong stuff. Like, So
definitely.
Wow, absolutely wise words. The wisest words possible. Let's get out of here. What can people expect Endgame Syndicate coming up for the rest of the week, Brian?
I think Yuda's doing he's gonna eventually do another no ball video. I don't know when he's planning on doing that. That should be fairly soon though. Next week, I think me and Dan are trying to do another best ball toy game.
Yeah.
I just released a video too on Monday on how to use ownership in DFS, and how to just adjust projections from content sites to one strategy. So I'll either do a second part to that, or how to what's it called? Basic tutorial on how to use R to make projections. I think some people might get something out of that.
Okay. Very cool. Nerdy will be working on getting all the computing power necessary to do the guy who gets 0 for 16 weeks and scores 50 in week 17. That'll be done for about the 2041 NFL season. So when we get that done, we'll bring it all to you. That is going to do it for us here at Endgame. We will be back with another one of these streams next week. See y'all then. Later.